This is a Culture Connect recording for the Ministry of Spiritology YouTube channel and other video content disseminations. I am the interfaith minister, the initiator of the Ministry of Spiritology, Nkanwi Fokwa Ambe, the Nkala of Bafut, representing in Accra, Ghana, with the situation over in Cameroon, where we founded the Ministry of Spiritology. Ambazonia is trying to restore the southern Cameroon's sovereignty, and that had to push us out of that location. That's not what this video is about. This is actually a recording under the segment of our YouTube channel video content for the minister's Red Pill Diaries. So I just want to get into all of that, keeping you all regularly enlightened and on point. This is the pandemic year of its beginning phase of implementation. Last year we saw a lot of chaos. Really, 2021 is beginning with some resolutions to that chaos. We know Donald Trump will be going out of the White House in just a couple of days, and it's basically setting the pace for what is being called the Great Reset in most initiate circles, because a lot of things are changing on the planet. Even right down to our individual lives. And, we have to make sure that our ministry participants are regularly enlightened, given essentially what we know and is called red pill knowledge, so that they are able to give themselves the orientation on how to cope with the situations that they will be faced in the development of their soul. And this particular recording, we're going to entitle it with the topic, "Why Are African Men Still Paying Dowry?" We want to talk about red pill diaries and, the whole context of red pill knowledge as it's given birth to awakening. That's what it definitely represents and means. When you're getting red pill knowledge, you are getting knowledge that awakens you to a deeper understanding of reality, which perhaps you were sleeping from. Because when you see the whole pill context, of which it's used, taken from the movie The Matrix, in which Neo, representing the neophyte, the individual who comes into initiation first without having ever been aware of what the Matrix is, what is reality, which is what the Matrix symbolically means in that movie. He meets Morpheus, and Morpheus actually is a representation in its etymology with that name that refers to someone who's sleeping. But incidentally, in the context of this movie, it's kind of like a reverse type of, meaning, which is used to imply that Morpheus is the one who's going around waking people up who are asleep. And, he offers Neo at one point in the movie the red pill and the blue pill, and it tells him that if he'll take the red pill, he's going to go down the rabbit hole. That's a metaphor from Alice in Wonderland, and the white rabbit taking Alice down, the rabbit hole, and with all of its confusions and twists and turns and mayhem and madness about reality and her inward journey into herself, which is what going down that rabbit hole also represented, and that's what we're doing with this channel. We're going to give you that understanding of how far the red pill knowledge goes with this particular topic. So, why are African men still paying dowry? Let's take that red pill on that and look at it in a real context. We have to first understand something, and when I'm saying African men specifically, we should recognize I'll be talking in the context of generally African culture. Now, we can't normally just give a monolithic presentation of African culture and say that it's just, one particular culture that is represented in every tribe. When we're talking of Africa, we're talking of over 50-something countries. When we get into individual countries, some countries like Cameroon, they'll boast of even having over 256 ethnic groups. So when you get into other countries like even Ghana, you see the Akan, you see the Fante, the Asante, the Ebe as well. You see that you can't actually specifically give a nomenclature of what African culture and tradition is to generalize it in such a way that it could be broadly applied to all situations. So bear with me, even though I'm saying, why are African men still paying, the bride price, essentially. There's dowry, which in the Indian culture is when the woman's family actually pays a type of compensation and settlement to the man's family. But we're talking about dowry in the African context, for specifically using the word bride price, because they do get mixed around sometimes. The bride price itself is money that a man pays to a woman when he wants to marry her. Normally this money is paid to her family, and when he's giving this compensation to her family for 3 priority reasons, as we learn in cultural studies broadly, that from antiquity, when a man wanted to marry a woman, he would pay bride price specifically because he is actually compensating her first as an individual for the consent to have sex with her. This is what cultural studies actually teaches from a universal perspective. Second, he's also compensating the woman for the right to be able to have offspring through her, that the children that she does give birth to through him having sexual intercourse with her will essentially be his offspring. He will own them. And the third premise for which dowry or the bride price was paid in the evolution of African culture generally is because the gentleman is giving a compensation to the woman's family for her upbringing, whether she was educated in varying schools, her professional stature in society, as well as her ethics and morality. Traditionally, with Judaic, Islamic, African cultures, generally before what we want to context now as modern times, a man was expected to marry a woman who was chaste or who was a virgin. So the bride price had a very serious role to play in that, because when he was paying it, if the woman was found to have not been a virgin, that is a woman who has never had sexual intercourse, then the bride price was either supposed to be diminished if the individual who is the groom seeking to become the husband of that woman insist on it, or at times even it was grounds to nullify a marriage process in which a man wanted to marry a woman entirely. And as we've come into modern times, recognizing that marriage has its origins with the priority of regulating how a man will take a woman in the community to be his wife and begin to have offspring with her. You have issues like overpopulation, the continuity of the tribe, the continuity of his family, that whole lineage and concept. These are varying sub-motives for why the bride price was raised and existed as a socioeconomic, we could say, right to have a woman, so that we would be certain that an individual male was up to stature to take a woman into his house. And back in the old days, it would be more about a man in an agrarian culture with a system of communalism who would be marrying a woman to live a type of farmstead life, perhaps. And then now you see with the advent of colonialism coming into African culture, bringing on the Western imperialism, essentially, the basis of capitalism and its use and manipulation through the Christian religion, we see that everything now became commodified, essentially, right down to sexuality, marriage, and even water, even basic foods. Before maybe we had cowries and things like that we could trade. Most trade for acquisition of commodities was done by bartering. But the advent of colonialism broadened the economic activity in Africa into a network which was beyond its shores, which had its own precepts for how it would be implemented. And we know colonialism, that was the subjection of Africa in the first place. So, our traditions, our rights, our pageantries were broken and have been influenced by this whole system, which has come from out of the continent, which now puts us into this position as we are questioning today, why are African men still paying bride price? You see it. From all of what we see, the bride price was paid for, it's been changed because we have concepts of radical feminism which have been imported from the West through, the enslavement and colonialism, essentially. The whole depletion and disenfranchisement of African culture has brought in, I'm not going to say that feminism, if it's taken in the context of building women up economically, giving them more rights over their sexuality so that they'll not be exploited, recognizing their social equity in the community so that they can also play their equal role as was intended by the positive African traditions that did exist. But when we see that actually, unfortunately, the bride price and dowry now in a red pill context is actually being abused by women, because the whole subject and discussion about women's empowerment through radical feminism seems to enforce more of sexual liberation and freedom upon the African woman with the deficient economic situation of Africa. You have to understand that colonialism broke the economy and its evolution in such a way that African men who were generally playing their standard role by their women now were forced to get into, they had to leave the rural environments, go to the city to get into the whole colonial administration and economic setup which was being brought, which was more for exploitation of African resources and sending them out of a country, as opposed to giving the African man who would be working in them an equal wage so that he could balance up his family, like, the people in Europe who they're having these modern concepts, as they're going to like to call it. They're allowing their women to reach a certain level of empowerment, which is generally necessary for equity. But in Africa, our transition was not able to move into that because of the economic exploitation. And our women don't recognize this, but instead are taken now by, the TV images, Android phones are in everyone's hands. We have the whole Cardi B phenomena and theme promoting that, basically a woman, even Nicki Minaj, I don't want to blame Beyonce because, I do have a lot of respect for her, but, back in the 90s when she was like, can you pay my bills? All of that gave a context and concept to the African woman to instead start to look at empowerment from an exploitative position and perspective, as opposed to her building up her relationship with her African male counterpart who also is going through the struggle. So African woman's like, can you pay my bills? Nicki Minaj is coming out with the eyelashes, enforcing more of a sexual capacity to get a man to pay her bills through using sexuality to exploit males. It's something that's going on in the West. It's been imported to Africa, my people. That's the red pill on it, and we have to really recognize that, especially as African men. Now, given African, red pill, I'm not going to be too polarized and looking at it from what would be deemed a chauvinistic perspective. I'm going to be talking more in the context of balanced and anti-bias. But literally, what we see happening today is feminism has introduced this concept of equality as opposed to equity, and sexual freedom in itself is more about the freedom of the woman to be sexually wanton. Unfortunately, you find in Facebook social media groups, instead of women talking about how to build marriages, they're more concerned about whether the husband's gonna marry them in court, marry them by tradition, and also do the white wedding, because it's a lot more about the pomp and getting it out into the public that she's basically learned and possibly is gonna burn a man. Let's just speak real on it, and a lot of African men are getting caught up and not understanding that this is a system that is being created, which has been imported from the West, which the African woman has not actually understood how to harmonize it with her social role. The African man too, he's having his own issues to it, harmonizing with the social role, because from antiquity, the rate of promiscuity between both African males and African women, we wouldn't say that it's as rife as it is now, because the idea of dowry and bride price, which was associated with the man taking the woman in honor, now the African woman with the radical feminism concepts of, even where we hear about the talk about legalizing prostitution. The African woman cannot understand that by legalizing prostitution, the aim is to be able to protect the professional priorities of the woman who is involved in it, as well as even perhaps the men who are involved in it, as well as guarantee her certain sexually reproductive rights and protection in case maybe she's raped, to be able to follow up with health care for, testing for diseases, things of that nature. That's what it's more about, as opposed to the African woman who, unfortunately, is just taking it from the perspective of wanton sex, equates now the idea of, free or legalized prostitution with her devaluing her concept in the bride price, because the bride price, you see, as it was established, had those two primary connotations: to give the man sexual rights to the woman and to have children with the woman. And we see that, point two is already being deflected with the misconception of what African, feminism and this whole idea of modernization in the context of what we are living in this, neo-colonial situation is all about. Truthfully, our women, y'all are missing the point. And men, a lot of y'all are playing into this because you've grown up in the tradition. You're supposed to have that priority to want to raise a home. That's just the foundation of how men have been educated to believe that they play a dominant role in keeping the nuclear center of society. But the women are being educated that they want to, be independent. Some of them talk about how they don't even want to get married. They feel free enough to have their own children, out of wedlock. And I'm not saying that that's a wrong thing. Things are happening on the earth. But I'm trying to bring out this point, truthfully, that society's changing. The tradition has to be modified in this context. And if African men are still paying dowry for women who now are economically empowered, who have already violated the pretext upon which traditionally the dowry or the bride price was being paid in a modern context, which they insist, then I think if it's really about equality, as the feminist or the radical feminists or the African women are talking about, then they should recognize that they cannot fully see equality if they're going to insist on this concept of a bride price being paid, because we know that in all of that, it puts money on the woman's head and puts her in a scale and weighs it. And generally, it's going to relegate the woman to being some piece of property. And honestly, we're not saying that we have to cancel out the tradition. We're not saying we have to eliminate, bride price, polygamy, get into all the aspects of African traditional marriage and just, demonize them as being, irrelevant and repugnant to the evolution of social justice and development. But we do recognize that we need laws and a recognition of tradition, which does also protect both parties, both the male and the female party in this situation now. Because imagine if a man is going to now be insisted on paying a very high bride price for a woman who, after him accepting her with all of these, traditional shortcomings as far as that is, though he's being actually levied that bride price on that pretext, and then his marriage now collapses. Who actually is going to be out of luck? Who actually is going to carry the greater burden in violation? Because a lot of the women now, they would take the children. You see, that's a new concept. And then they've already come into the marriage, with, a lot of baggage, a lot of men in sexual interactions, which gives them, truthfully, there's psychological things associated with that, which when she gets into the man's house, she is inadequate unless she's really strong to respect him and give that representation and, representation and respect of the boundaries even of her marriage with the ex-boyfriends and all of that. And truthfully, my brothers and sisters, we're dealing with all of that. We know we're dealing with all of that. We need to talk in the red pill context and be honest about all of this. If a woman's not willing to accept this, it means that she's just trying to get over on her man. And brother, you getting into that marriage without putting all these things in perspective, truthfully, you're gonna get messed up, my man. So, I'm just coming at you clear, so that I should put this in clear context and recognition, because the modern woman cannot still want a traditional marriage setup. And that's why you see a lot of women, in the churches praying, falling down to Jesus, still going out, premarital sex, fornication, all the things their Bible even says they shouldn't do. But they're waiting for a husband who's not coming. Because brothers around the block, they see you playing around with all them dudes. When y'all sitting in the bars, when y'all twerking, doing all of that, the dude's he has a concept that he's gonna play with this girl. He likes her because she's a hot, she's a free chick at that point. But when he wants to settle down, he's not gonna want to settle down with a woman who is actually taking herself to a level where he feels that he's gonna be an option to her and not the real priority of love. And a lot of women now come out with this hypergamy, where they're just trying to, get married to a man who's gonna elevate their social status. And whether she's gone, got a PhD, she's a lawyer or a doctor, she's doing all that education. Her parents are grooming her up with all of that so that she'll be able to represent with a higher value to get a higher value man. But she has not represented the value of what it actually was supposed to mean by tradition. I want you all to come back to this and keep this in proper context because it's an issue. It's a serious concern that we have to look at. And I'll be honest, you see, if tradition will not be modified, then above the customary courts, like I said it, the laws have to be able and ready to protect both individuals, equally. And if they're not going to, then women, truthfully, I'm going to tell you, my brothers, y'all seeing it. Truthfully, women, y'all seeing it. Y'all need to keep yourselves in check. You need to reflect on whether you think that all of this, I need to get a man. If I can't get a man, a man's got to be like this for me before he's ready. By the pretext of which the bride price was first established and, the ethics that you should know are concerned with getting a good husband. Are you actually up to par? You know what I'm saying? Because a good man's going to come along and if his brain is not socially oriented appropriately to understand what I'm talking about, he's going to get into a relationship with you, realize these things subconsciously later, and then that's when the fight in the marriage is going to start. The clashes. When he's sitting down and he's married and you got your phone passworded, your phone's always around you, people are calling you odd hours, he starts seeing all those fishy movements because you shouldn't be going and meeting that ex-boyfriend while you married. Truth be told, we be hearing a lot of women be having extramarital affairs or, premarital affairs on the eve of their marriages and white weddings and all of that with an ex-dude from back in the day because she feels she's about to still get trapped. So all of this deceit, creating a man as an option, when he feels it later on in the marriage, the conflict comes in and you all will be like, oh, that's a bad man. That's a bad man. If he loved me, he would just accept all of these mistakes that I'm intentionally creating. But he's not, truthfully, he's not obliged to. And the conflict comes in. The marriage, it disintegrates, it fails. And whose fault is it? Ask yourself. I'm not going to blame that brother. You need to put yourself in that mirror and stop this idea of feminine entitlement. Because if you spoil your situation, don't force a brother to think he's going to come and drink sour milk. It's all separated and curdled. He don't make cheese. He was going to use that milk to eat his cereal. Not that milk is actually even good for you, but that's just the analogy right there. So that's the red pill on this, truthfully. Why are African men still paying dowry? Y'all need to question that and put it in check, truthfully, because y'all getting played. Y'all getting set up into that beta male provider position, you know what I'm saying? Where you got a woman who's just looking at you like an option, you out there doing everything. And then maybe you discover some few days later, you know what I'm saying, that what you thought isn't what it is. You be in a marriage 2, 3, 4, 5, 20 years, it starts to disintegrate. And it's like that first video that I did on the 5 pillars of intimate compatibility. There was 5 of them. If y'all not sexually compatible, you're not intellectually compatible, you're not psychologically compatible, you're not economically compatible, you're not spiritually compatible, then at any point in the relationship, especially on the eve of it, because all marriages, all serious relationships will collapse at the level of selection, because the brother, you're not paying attention to these signs. You know what I'm saying? My sister, you're not paying attention to these signs. You're looking after that economics and not seeing if you psychologically going to be able to be compatible with that man. You know what I'm saying? And it becomes confusion. So I don't want to really talk a lot. This video is actually taking some time, but I really hope that y'all got the message on this, truthfully. Why y'all still paying that dowry when you cheating? You know what I'm saying? That's why they had it back out there. Polygamy was an option. A man could even get a second wife. He could do things like that. Y'all women know that you're supposed to be empowered. If you don't like the situation, don't get into it. If it gets too hot, that's what divorce is for. Like I'm saying, the laws are out there. Or you need to be able to sit down, my brother, when you're going to sign that marriage certificate, you sign separate property. Don't go sign no joint property. You know what I'm saying? Put yourself in a position that both of you all should be able to live like mature adults, respecting what each other's sexual capacities or psychological capacities might be. When maybe you want to have an extra partner or be able to hang out with a dude from back in the day, all of that. You're supposed to sit down and discuss all of that clearly. It's supposed to be known. My brother, don't go into that marriage with that assumption that she's sweet defenseless, you know what I'm saying? She don't play tricks and all of that. That's just how the media hype, the Bible talking all that Virgin Mary, all that. Truthfully, that's not real, man. We could break that down, Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, and get into that. And that'll probably be the next video, so that I'll actually explain to you all how that psychological hypnosis is working on people with that false image of this, feminine purity, which has never actually existed. Those laws just existed to try and keep women in check. And now women are no longer in check, according to the tradition. Truthfully, it's hunting season. They call themselves slay queens. So who are they trying to kill? What are they trying to kill? You know what I'm saying? It's not just about looking good. Truthfully, we saw it happen to Dre. You saw Will Smith in the entanglement. Truthfully, there's entanglement out there, my fellas. And until you get up into it, you ain't gonna get the red pill, because that's when your eyes are gonna open. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna go ahead and end right there. I really hope y'all got the message and y'all gonna implement this knowledge, you know what I'm saying? And maybe you can start to see your relationship improve. If not, like I'm just gonna end it when I be talking this red pill on relationships specifically. A lot of y'all in relationships you're not even supposed to be in. So you need to react to that, you know what I'm saying? Whether male or female, you need to react to that. And that's why I'm gonna go ahead and end it, you know what I'm saying? This has been Minister Nkatla Bafut Nkangwi Foko Mbe, speaking on Minister's Red Pill Diaries for the Ministry of Spiritology. You know what I'm saying? We're going to disseminate this in the Culture Connect forum. If you're interested in finding out about that forum, you can get to our Facebook page. We do have a link that you can get involved in the group there, because right now with the COVID-19 situation, pandemic in action, we're doing mostly virtual consultations and most of virtual gatherings and conferences. That's, our general ministry forum where we keep the information flowing. So you can get to our Facebook page, that's Ministry of Spiritology on Facebook. You'll be able to find the link on our page. Or, you can even get to the YouTube channel. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you do, of course, maybe drop a comment, like the video, get into the circulation. And you can hit me up or any of our other administrators inside our networks, and we'll definitely get you involved with the ministry so that you can develop your soul on this path that we are giving natural spirituality back to Africa and the world, using the African continent as a base. So, once again, I've been the Minister Nkangwi Foko Mbe. Hit me up on Facebook, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna go ahead and drop my WhatsApp contact down there, so that you can make sure you can even get in contact with me if you need to do any consultations, you know what I'm saying? We also do tarot readings. We also do, red pill marriage and relationship coaching. We also offer, personal, individual, spiritual development and advisory. So, we've got a whole list of activities which we do provide to ministry participant individuals who decide to become, members of the ministry, so we can be promoting this African conscious movement. Now, truthfully, I know I probably spoke a lot. It's supposed to be just 15 minutes. But I'm gonna go ahead and get out there, hoping, like I said, y'all got the message. That's good. Implement it. Y'all stay blessed out there, for real. You know what I'm saying? Y'all stay sprinkled, you know what I'm saying, with that beauty and that anointing of that spiritual Ra, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna go ahead and drop there. Make sure that you do subscribe so that you get a notification for our next video. And that's how we're gonna be out. One love, peace, and peace profound.